Pa Chao Yang. What's up, Chao? All right, let's see here. Chao's question: Is it toxic wrong to rant your feelings, emotions about your relationship with your spouse, partner, family, friends, co-worker, etc.? What can be done in a positive way to not mislead others towards your feelings about that person so they won't think negatively? Okay, let me just process what the question says here. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, the question you're asking sounds like, is it toxic or is it wrong to talk about, let's just choose one of the names here, let's say your spouse, since that's the first one. Is it toxic or wrong to rant about your feelings about your relationship with your spouse, with other people, right? So for example, I think sounds like, according to your question, my wife did something that pissed me off. Is it toxic or is it wrong for me to rant about my feelings about her to other people? Talk about how she did this, she did that, she's a horrible person, should have never married her, what was I thinking, should have left the altar when I had the chance, right? So all these things, right? So ranting, very toxic about the relationship itself. Is it wrong to do that? And what can be done in a positive way to not mislead others towards your feeling about that person so they don't think negatively? So sounds like what you're saying is it wrong to talk about my wife in a negative way to another person? And what can I do differently in a positive way so that that person doesn't get the impression that my wife is this monster? Make sure I'm understanding your question correctly, okay, Chao? But when I answer it, I think that's what I'm hearing when I read your question. The short answer is, don't speak ill about your wife or your spouse. That's the short answer. Because the long answer is, that person that you're talking to, that you're sharing about your wife to, they don't have the full picture. They don't have the full story of what happened. They only get a snapshot of what happened or what's been happening. And so, yes, that's going to conflate, that's going to paint a picture of a monster that stays with them, of your spouse. They only get a snippet only. They don't get to hear about all the amazing things that your spouse did. They don't get to hear about the time when you needed support the most and nobody was there, and your spouse was the only person there to get you out from the ashes. They don't get to hear all these great things. But if you only paint that part right there to the person, then they only get a snapshot of that. So that's not going to be helpful. So while, yeah, you may be upset with your wife, you could just also share that my wife and I, we've been arguing. And that's it. Or if you feel like you can't stop, you can't help yourself, you don't have to even share that with the other person. You don't have to share that you and your wife are going through a lot of troubles, a lot of issues. If anything, what I would recommend is, how about you don't talk to that person about your wife and your problems? How about you go back and talk to your wife about your wife? That's what I would recommend. Go back and talk to your wife about your wife. The question that we've been asking here is, what's underneath, right? What's underneath, and what's the resistance in going to talking to your wife about your wife in the way that it's affecting you? So I don't even recommend you talking to other people about your wife and their problem. Your problem should stay in the house. Work through it in the house. Talk to your spouse. If she's what's creating a lot of issues and you're noticing that, talk to your wife about it. If you're noticing a resistance, you're afraid to talk to your spouse, what is happening? What's going on there? You got to have more conversations and talk about it. So I don't recommend going out and talking to other people about your wife in a negative way, because yes, it does paint a bad picture. What can be done in a more positive way to not mislead? Short answer again is, don't talk about your wife and the bad things she did to other people. They don't get the full picture. Unless, okay, here's the caveat, unless the person that you're talking to about your wife is a person who you trust and also knows your relationship well. So if my wife is doing something that makes me super upset, And I feel like I just got to vent. I need to process my thoughts with somebody externally and not just live inside my mind. And I go and talk to, let's say, my sister who knows me very well, my sister who knows my wife very well, my sister who understands my wife and I, our relationship very well, has history with us, who can remain objective in the conversation. I might go and tell her about what's happening. And she might go, wow, that sucks. And she might say to you, what did you do in this process? Right? Remain objective in this conversation. And it doesn't really paint any picture, but she understands our history. That's when I would say, okay, yeah, talk about what's on your mind. Because at least that person can be objective. And what they want is for the both of you to grow together, not separate or paint negative pictures of one another. Great question, Chow. Got me thinking here. I hope my wife is not listening. I might be in trouble. Kidding.